Hello and welcome to Game 3, another exciting battle in the 2024 World Chess Championship. So in this third game, the challenger, 18-year-old Gukesh Damaraju of India, he begins with d4. A more solid approach, maybe more strategic opening. I believe he played e4 in the first game. And it didn't end well for him. So he switches things up with d4 controlling the center here. And the 32-year-old world champion from China, he responds with knight to f6. A flexible move, kind of waiting to see what his opponent does. And in the meantime, he has options here. He can play a King's Indian defense. Play a queen pawn opening. He has a variety of choices. So the young challenger plays knight to f3, also a flexible move, kind of giving him options. So it looks like both players are waiting to see what the other will do. All right, we have d5. So the center is equalized here. And what does the challenger do? He plays c4. So we have kind of a Queen's Gambit type opening here. So how will the world champion respond? All right, so this is the Queen's Gambit declined. Now normally it'll start with d4, d5, and then this c4 move followed by e6. But the move order can be changed up. So this move invites black to possibly capture here on c4, pulling a more valuable central pawn off to the side. But now it looks like we have an attack immediately in the center here. So the game continues with a recapture, keeping material even. And now we see a little bit of an imbalance. Black has a half-open E file to work with, while his opponent has the half-open C file. So the C and E files may be good, a good place to place rooks later in the game. So knight to C3, just continuing development. And now we have C6 here, fortifying the central pawn on D5. And the game continues with queen to C2. So this is a typical move in this position. You place the queen off the back rank, but not too far out where it can be attacked. So also, because that C file is half open, a lot of times you'll create a battery here with queen on C2 and a rook to C1. So the game continues with G6 here. So perhaps getting ready to fianchetto the bishop, but where will this bishop go? Probably here on G7. It doesn't look like from there it will do too much other than once the knight moves, it lines up on this important central pawn, but that can be fortified with E3. Maybe after this bishop is developed. So let's see what happens here. It looks like the best move in the position is played, h3. So this prevents any pieces from jumping to g4, especially this bishop, which would like to move outside of the pawn chain because this is a bad bishop on the same color squares as the central pawns. So the game continues with bishop to f5, the best move, attacking the queen here. So what does the young challenger do? He just gets the queen out of danger, but at the same time, he attacks this unprotected pawn. So now we have queen to b6, offering an early exchange of queens. So this is the best move according to the computer. What will the young challenger do? Well, he ignores that in favor of an immediate attack of this bishop, perhaps inviting the exchange, but that could lead to double isolated pawns here on the B file, although it would open the A file up, but that's easily blocked with an A6 pawn push here. So let's see what happens. Sure enough, the best move is to take the queen, leaving the young challenger with potentially long-term endgame weakness of doubled isolated pawns here. So how will play continue? Well, the bishop has to move as it was being attacked here. So kind of surprising. It launches forward, attacking this unprotected pawn instead of playing a safer retreating move. So let's see what happens. This attack on the pawn is ignored in favor of development here. So interesting move. The bishop does not capture the pawn and instead threatens this attack, capturing the pawn, and then this pawn cannot recapture, or the rook would capture this rook on the opened H file. All right, so things are getting interesting here. The excitement is building. What should be played next? All right, computer says this is the best move, getting off of that G file, fortifying this pawn. That way, if it's captured, we have a recapture, and the knight that would be attacking, this rook is protecting this, if these exchanges occur. So sure enough, we have an exchange of pawns, and now knight develops off the back rank, and a repositioning of the knight here. Quite interesting. This bishop now is in danger of being trapped, it looks like. The knight is protecting this pawn. Where can the bishop go? Well, it does have one option maybe here, but then this pawn could move up here and trap this bishop. So it's getting quite interesting. What will Ding Liren do in this position? So the bishop is ignored, this situation building here with this bishop, and we have the best move in the position. According to the computer, the game is almost even here, a slight edge with white at 0.19 after this best rook to G8 move. So it looks like this move will allow a pawn push with a counter threat on this bishop. And then that would possibly give an escape, perhaps for this, an escape for the bishop along this diagonal. All right, the game continues with a mistake by white. The first mistake of the game. This shifts the balance to 0.42 in favor of black. So even though material's even, black now has a half a pawn's worth of material advantage. The knight is under attack, so this knight moves forward, attacking the bishop, the best move in the position. So now we have bishop retreat, although the computer recommends bishop up here to c7 instead. So let's see what happens. The rook repositions, lining up on this unprotected bishop. Computer says that's an inaccuracy, that it would have been better to first drop the knight back to g7. Perhaps maybe from there it could reposition here and put pressure on this pawn, or even move forward here. Let's see what happens. So Gukesh plays f3 here, perhaps with an idea of pushing this pawn in the future. Let's see how things commence. So knight retreats and a discovered attack on the bishop here. And the game continues with the bishop pressing forward here to g3, which computer says is best. And at this point, black is still slightly ahead by 0.16. And the rook launches forward, targeting this unprotected pawn. And let's see what happens here. The best move is found a counterattack in the center. So a good general strategy is when there's an attack on the flank to counterattack in the center, as the center is more valuable real estate. And so, it's a better idea to deal with what's happening in the center. And this diverts the opponent's attention away from his attack here on the edge. All right, we have a blunder played by the world champion here. So apparently, knight to e6 would have been better. But now we have this blunder. So what is the young challenger going to do? Will he capture with the knight, with the pawn, and gain 2 pawns in the center, and then really trapping this bishop in? So let's see here. We have a pawn capture. The bishop is really entombed here for the moment. But now we have knight building pressure up on this pawn, and a counterattack. A great move here, the best move in the position. So now the trapped bishop is a goner, pretty much. So let's see how the world champion handles this position. He captures a pawn, defending the bishop. So I guess the bishop was not so much of a goner here, at least not right now anyway. So the game continues with an attack on the knight, which is defending the bishop. So it's only a matter of time for this bishop. We have a defense of the knight. All right, here we go. Some exchanges are in the works. But before that happens, the knight drops back. The young challenger, not wanting to give up his bishop pair at the moment, decides to drop back with the knight and then attack the protector with his own knight. So let's see here. We have a capture of the pawn, and now the bishop is unprotected. So of course the bishop is captured. An exchange of knights here. The king centralizes. And, how will we continue? Well, the knight launches forward here to a centralized position, blockading this isolated pawn, which is usually a good strategy. A blocked and immobile pawn is a much easier target than one that can move forward. So the computer says this is an inaccuracy, that it would have been better to immediately gain space on the queen side with a5, perhaps getting this pawn majority moving, which could be a good endgame advantage for the world champion. But he is behind in material. At the moment, it looks like the young challenger is ahead by +1. So the game continues with a knight launching forward here. And now we have the rook grabbing the open D file and at the same time pinning the knight to the king. So this could be dangerous. The king gets off of the open D file, the best move here. So now another pin with this rook. The bishop blocks that pin, protected by the rook, and the game continues with a6, although the computer recommends a5, just gaining even more space. This is more of a conservative approach here, but perhaps plans in the future to move these pawns, especially if this one moves, then this will keep the knight from being able to move forward here. All right, continuing on, we have b3, restricting the mobility of this knight, perhaps, allowing the rook to get off of the c file. And now rook moves forward. What does this do? Well, it guards the 7th rank, protecting these pawns. maybe gives the king an option of moving towards the queen side. So Gukesh drops back. Rooks protecting one another here, so that's usually a good strategy. Maybe a waiting move here to see what the world champion will do next. So the game continues with the king moving forward, and that's also a good strategy as you go into an end game. As long as the queens are off the board and the king is in no danger, it can be a great idea to move your king forward and have the king help participate in the end game battle, because the king can be that extra piece that makes all the difference in attack or defense. So the rook moves back here to the open D file, maybe getting ready to contest this file with black's rook here. So the king just drops back, and apparently this is the best move. It looks like we have kind of a waiting game here. Each player kind of moving back and forth, feeling out their opponent, kind of waiting to see what will occur next. So bishop forking the rook and the knight here. So the game continues with a rook retreat, attacking this unprotected pawn. And now we have the knight dropping back, defending the pawn, but there is a possibility of a capture here of the knight. The rooks are now facing one another. So the game continues with an exchange of knights. This allows the king to move further up the board. Usually a good strategy in the endgame. Get that king into the action to help the pieces and help defend these pawns as well. All right, bishop has centralized, attacking the more valuable rook here, and the rook moves to the H file. So now we have the H file contested with the two rooks battling one another, and then these two rooks are lined up. So let's see what happens here. Not wanting to exchange material, the world champion avoids the rook trade, but at the same time he grabs this pawn. So material is even at the moment, but imbalanced. We have two rooks, so two bishops. The bishop pair is a definite advantage on this open board for white, but black has 3 pawns for that bishop pair, so a pawn majority on both sides, and that could be an advantage going into the end game. So what will happen in this unbalanced position? Now we have the bishops jumping into action here, and they can be very dangerous, a bishop pair on an open board like this. So the rook is attacked, and now we have a block with this pawn push. Will the pawns be exchanged? Let's see what happens here. No. Bishop to f4, attacking the rook. So the rook moves to h5, and now, I'm sorry to say, but at this point the game ended. I believe the world champion ended up running out of time here. As we see on the clock, Gukesh had 9.5 minutes versus 5 seconds. So the world champion ended up running out of time. The computer gives white a +4 after this best move. And it looks like the best option here would be a bishop capture. So bishop captures, that's one option. Let's see what the second and third moves are repositioning the king, either going to e2 or g2, but notice not well, of course you can't go to these dark squares at the moment because the bishop is covering them, but it's generally not a good idea. If your opponent has a bishop in the endgame, you would like to stay on the opposite colored squares so that bishop is not a threat to your king and pieces. But as white has both of the bishops, the bishop pair, that's very dangerous, especially once these pawns open up here. So this is where the game ended. I'll go ahead and, well, let me bring up the game review and see what the accuracy percentage of both players was. And then I'll go back to this and see how the game could have continued. So first, let me pull up this game review. Oh man, outstanding by the young challenger. He played at 97.1% accuracy level here. And if he continues this, it is going to be a tough world championship match for the world champion Ding Liren, who played at 90.6. You know, still a good game in the 90th percentile here. But, you know, just what can you do when your opponent plays at a 97.1% accuracy rating? And it looks like the game was even for the first half of the game until white gained an advantage and just held on to that advantage, slowly building on it. All right, 4 great moves by the young challenger, Gukesh Damaraju of India. And it looks like inaccuracies. 4 by the world champion, 1 mistake by the young challenger, and 1 blunder by the world champion. So we have the young challenger playing at a 3,000 rating level, which you may not be able to see here underneath my image. So I can slide that up there. So you can see below here, 3,000 level played for the young, the young challenger. And then the world champion, he played at a 2650 level, you know, so he struggled a little bit in this game. Now, opening accuracy, 100% for the challenger and 100% for the champion. So they both played the opening well, but in the middle game, 96.1% accuracy for the young challenger and 87.6% for the champion. All right. I will go back here and take a look at how the game could have ended. So rook to h5 was the last move, and it looks like this is the best move, so we'll take a look at that. Capture, and then what is best for black? It looks like the best move is to capture here. Interesting. It's to capture with the rook. The other option is rook takes h1, which, you know, I guess if you wanted to keep things a little bit more even in material, I don't know. This is a tough call. The problem is you have this attack. So we'll go with what the computer says is best. It looks like capture here, and then, you know, of course, the pawn will capture. Pawn captures, and then what? Bishop to e3. You know, you're ahead by a rook here. You know, you're only ahead +2 as far as material, but what do we have? A rook and a pawn for 4 pawns. So the pawns could be, you know, 1 advantage for black, but it's not looking good. So the computer says that bishop to e3 would be best, trying to exchange off even more material. And then the recommendation is to keep that bishop with, let's see, bishop to e5 apparently. And then, you know, of course, you would like to exchange off even more material. King captures. Oh, and then it's not looking good. Rook attacking the king. It's best for the king to move forward but now another pawn is lost. Yeah, so, what could happen after this? It looks like king to d5 might be one of the best moves, or bishop to c3. But now we have, let's see, rook to a7, targeting this unprotected pawn. Bishop, where to d6. And yeah, you could just go ahead and capture this, and then it would not be looking too good. Anyway, you get the picture. You can play this out on your own if you'd really like to see much more. I guess I could go back and take a look at one more thing before I wrap this up. Let's see here. If we go back to the end. Okay, the other option, the number 2 move I wanted to take a look at. So the game ended at this position. The best move here would be to capture. And we looked at rook captures, but what about this capture? If the rook takes here, well, then you would have a capture with check. The king would be forced to capture, and then, a capture over here. So after this, the recommendation is c5, and now the king could move over here and protect this pawn if the rook comes up to the 7th rank here. So bishop to e3, threatening to exchange off more material here. And then that would be disastrous. So you want to avoid trades when you're behind, but you get the picture. The world champion would just be too far behind in material. All right, well, feel free to leave any comments. Let me know what you thought of this crazy third game. It's shaping up to be a very exciting World Chess Championship in Singapore. So I think they are off tomorrow and the holidays are coming. So I may not be able to do the next game on the day that it happens, but I will have a video for all of the games of this 2024 World Chess Championship, so stay tuned in the future for those. So in the meantime, have a happy holiday for those that are enjoying it. As I said, feel free to leave any comments, like and subscribe to support the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching and have a super chess day.